You mentioned a podcast about serial killers. Was that an
Yeah.
Was that an influence? And all those Netflix series about the
Yeah.
Yorkshire Ripper and the Night Stalker and all those kind of things. Were they
Night
influences?
Stalker, the Night Stalker, there's a scene where they keep cutting past this scene of downtown LA,
Mm.
right, in that show where he was near a bus terminal. We wrote the album right by that bus terminal.
Okay.
But yeah, it has been an influence because we watch that stuff and we've been listening to podcasts about serial killers on tour. I mean, people used to ask us like, well, what are you listening to in the tour bus and stuff? And we'd be like, it's not music. We're listening to podcasts. So it was very natural for us to write about those things because we're not just you're not just singing about a serial killer. You're singing about something you feel, but you're just using that as the method. You're telling it through the eyes of that or using that story. But what you're talking about is something more personal. But there's so much of that in our environment. It absolutely influenced us. And being in Los Angeles when we wrote the album, which is like some of the really iconic murders,
Sure.
in the 70s and 80s are in LA. I think we just felt very like, I guess strangely, it's sort of inspiring to us.
Mm.
It sounds a bit creepy, but it's true.
No,
I
but there
think,
is something interesting, and there's something to that. I mean, there is a reason why so many people like those kind of murder mysteries or serial killer
yeah,
documentary. I mean, I've read a bunch of books about psychopaths, and it's just very compelling.
yeah, I agree. I think there's a real pull, and you can tell because there's so many more of them every week on
Sure.
Netflix that people are really drawn to it, and we are too. I don't exactly know why, but it's that fascination, I guess, with the darkest elements of humankind. For me, I'm always fascinated by those people who are right on the edge of society.
Mm.
They're almost outside of society, and that always seems interesting to me. And my armchair psychologist perspective is like, well, maybe part of that outsider thing is what we find fascinating as a band we feel like we've always been treated as kind of outsiders to everything.
Mm.
Maybe there's something in that we weirdly relate to, or or it has some sense of like magnetism for us because it's something we understand. Yeah. So I mean, that stuff's all over the record.
I find it very, especially I had this with the Yorkshire Ripper one, where I'm so fascinated how somebody can lead a seemingly normal life, but then be this brutal murderer some of the time. It makes no sense to me. It's
Yeah,
just
it is.
fascinating.
It is. It's completely fascinating. We are both like actually really addicted to this stuff. Like, if one of us finds a new podcast, we'll text each other straight away. Like, I found there's a new one. There's a new one.
So
It's
something
quite
else horrible happened. Have a look at this.
yeah. And it's funny because we always joke, like as a band, we don't take ourselves seriously. As people, we're not fucking rock stars with shades on all day. We don't think in kind of very big conceptual ways. We mostly are just dicking around, making each other laugh and being silly. But we take what we do really seriously. And the things that we're always interested in are usually quite extreme and intense and quite dark. But I don't think you'd expect it if you met us as people because we're just kind of goons. It's funny. It's like, I feel like we have this like secret life. And on this record, that secret life's actually coming out a bit and you can kind of realize who we really are.